Radical innovation starts with medical discussion. Talking about the future and what comes next with Project MedTech.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lindsay Deneen, Director of Marketing and Engagement at Project MedTech, and welcome to another episode of the Project MedTech podcast. If we can help you in any way, or you would like to suggest a future guest, you can email us at info@projectmedtech.com. If conversations like this are helpful, that's exactly why we bring people together at our signature events, the Midwest Showcase, the Startup Symposium, and Coming to America. For more on our events that include networking, education, and pitch competitions for startups, check them out at www.projectmedtech.com. We even have sponsorship options if your company is also dedicated to accelerating medical technology to impact patient lives. So reach out today to get involved. The Project MedTech podcast is proudly sponsored by Ward Law. Ward Law Office, LLC is a boutique law firm specializing in the practice of patent and trademark law. They are committed to providing inventors, entrepreneurs, and businesses of all types with personal and professional services and are flexible to meet your unique needs. It is their goal to both educate on how to secure valuable patent and trademark protection and to provide high-quality services at rates affordable to independent inventors, startups, and small businesses alike. Without further ado, let's dive in.
Okay, Michelle, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's start with an introduction to who you are and your background in the space.
Sure. So my name is Michelle Ottey. I am the president of CIC Campuses and Labs. I'm in a global role, but I am based in our Philadelphia campus. My background is actually so my degree is in genetics and cell biology. I'm a Philly bred, born and bred person, been here my whole life. My degree is from Thomas Jefferson University. I did my postdoc at UPenn. I then, after my postdoc, I was, doing cancer research. I moved into reproduction and worked at Fairfax Cryobank right at 34th and Market. And then in January of 2022, I joined CIC, which is Cambridge Innovation Centers. Joined CIC to run the Philadelphia campus, which we're 137,000 square feet, 90,000 square feet of which are wet labs, 5,000 square feet of shared facilities for the lab clients, and have been with CIC since, have loved getting into this space and really learning about innovation ecosystems and how space and infrastructure and programming and community are all so important to the startup community, whether you're a med tech, a life science company doing CAR T therapies, or a cosmetics company. We are industry agnostic. We serve all different types of companies as members, and moved into the global role about 2 years ago, and have been privileged enough to be able to visit all of our campuses across the globe.
Maybe explain a little bit more about CIC, and you're talking about campuses across the globe. How big is the organization, and then we can dive into some of the more granular details, because the whole lab space thing is an issue in a lot of cities. It's actually probably one of those things that is a rate determining factor for communities. And so, especially when you talk about innovation happening maybe outside of a university, right? Once you spin that out. But first, give me the overview of CIC.
Okay, so CIC is, I think we're in our 27th year, founded in Kendall Square up in Cambridge. We have 2 buildings in Cambridge. Our founder, Tim Rowe, was an MIT grad that, sort of organically came up with this idea for a co-working space with some of his friends, and ended up building this great community and ecosystem as part of the great Kendall Square area in Cambridge. And then we also have a building in Boston. We have a campus in Providence in Rhode Island that is, I love that campus. There's something really charming about the Providence campus. I, of course, am based here in the Philadelphia campus, which is bigger. We are 6 floors here in University City Square. We're at 3765 Market Street. Philly is wet labs and offices and conference meeting spaces, event spaces. And then we are also in St. Louis with wet labs and all of those other things. In the EU, we're in Rotterdam, Warsaw, and Berlin. And I think we'll end up talking about the Berlin campus because it's really relevant. They have a lot of really cool maker space and prototyping space and all of the other CIC amenities. And then in Japan, we are in Tokyo as an anchor. And then our Fukuoka site just celebrated its anniversary in April for their first year opening. And actually later this month, or where are we at? Beginning of June, we have a soft opening for our newest campus in Osaka, which is also a life science campus. It doesn't have labs per se, but we are supporting the life sciences in Nakanoshima Cross. Generally, CIC offers space, flexible terms. It can be everything from co-working to private offices. We have wet lab spaces, which are rentable by the bench. You can start with a single bench and grow, and we have a lot of examples of companies that have done that. And then, of course, there's meeting spaces, conference rooms, amenities like kitchens and wellness rooms, nursing rooms, things like that. And then we, of course, have our incredible team members. So we are much more highly staffed than other facilities that are somewhat similar to us, because we really recognize that startups and entrepreneurs really need that community support as well as the infrastructure support when they're really spinning out or growing their startup. And, we are, as I said earlier, industry agnostic, but our campuses have sort of clusters or hubs that we really invest into because we want to serve the member companies that we have. I actually can't believe I forgot to mention this. We're also working with the EDC in New York to open BatWorks in 2030, which is the Brooklyn Army Terminal, which is going to be a climate tech hub, which is going to have some really cool prototyping spaces. And again, all of the similar amenities. So we are obviously in a growth mode where we're looking to expand. And what you're going to find at all of our campuses is that CIC is in these areas because there is a density of need, intellect, money, and talent. And so, we come in, we are conveners. We have a whole business unit called Catalyst that does programming, soft landing programs. Like we also have the ability to activate those ecosystems. And of course, our partner company, Venture Cafe, which is located in our campuses, but also in other locations, that's providing regular programmatic content for the startup community.
Super cool. So Venture Cafe is a partner company or a sister company, or
let's call it a sister company, cousin. Gotcha. We're related.
Yeah, nice. Okay, got it. Yeah, very cool. Let me ask you this real quick while we're on the topic, because you just went through all the different places you're at.
Yeah.
How important is community support? Not the fact that you're bringing it, but like the buy-in of the local ecosystem. So the investor network there, the universities, the hospital systems, and more focused on life sciences, how much legwork is there to be done when you say, hey, there could be a good opportunity here. I want to talk to the players so that we all get off on the right foot here, because it doesn't, if you just go in and say, hey, look, we have this community, and the ecosystem isn't bought into it, I imagine it won't be successful. So kind of walk me through some of that, and then I guess that influences how you pick the location.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. We're nowhere by mistake or by accident. It's all very thoughtfully crafted. I'll use the Philadelphia campus as an example. The conversations with Philly started, I think, in 2012. It was University City Science Center. It was University City District. It was the city, CIC. We were all sort of in these conversations. It took years to develop this plan. And we're doing the build of this new building, and we opened in 2018. And so, that was a 4 to 6 year process of negotiations and figuring out what was needed and why should CIC come to the Philadelphia area. What could we bring and offer to the ecosystem? And what were the partners looking for? And so being from Philly, I feel like I can really talk about this honestly because we are a very particular kind of people. Very gritty, we get things done. We also like things done a certain way. And I always say Philly is the smallest big city. Everyone knows everyone. And so having those connections and those relationships in the ecosystem were incredibly important. It's very difficult for an outsider to come in. So the fact that CIC was able to come in, build the relationships, it took years of work, and it's not uncommon. These deals take a lot of times. Now we're working mostly with management agreement type situations for campus development, and so it requires a partner who believes in what COC brings to the table and can contribute to the ecosystem. It takes our team really, completing RFPs and doing tons of meetings to really demonstrate the value. So it's very thoughtfully done. And here in Philadelphia, it was really about helping to meet a need. It was about convening spaces. If you enter any of our campuses, they're all wildly different, but they all have the heart of CIC. I get really passionate about this because I think this is where the special thing happens. We're in this beautiful new building, Philadelphia, and then we're in an old factory building in Berlin, and they're wildly different, but you walk in and it still feels like CIC. And it's some design, but it's also the people and the types of people. And so it's a really thoughtful process. And we want to be where there is a need for convening and for community and for resources, because we want to help lower the barriers to entry for startups.
Yeah. Well, we share that same mission and vision, which is why we probably get along. And we're coming back for our second year in Philadelphia for our startup symposium. And it was so great the first year there. I had been there previously to University City Science Center with a previous company I worked at, and I knew there was just so much potential there. But the real magic happens when you can take that local ecosystem and slam it with a national ecosystem. And it's fun to watch those connections. And then to come back in year two, it's really cool to watch those connections, how they matured and how they're taking the next step, So super cool. We're really happy to be coming back to Philly. That'll be August 26th. Information on the website. Yeah. Thank you. One of the other things I have to mention, because you mentioned Providence, and I have never been to Providence, but growing up, my mom watched a show on TV called Providence. And I can remember, like, as a kid, just like that show, like I could just remember like bits and pieces of it, but it did make it feel like a really cool community. Like, I don't know if that was just like the TV show doing a really good job of editing it, but I'm pretty sure they shot it in Providence. It was called Providence. But anyways, and just anytime someone bring that up, it reminds me of that. It's like one of those core childhood memories, But so you did you said you did your PhD in genetics, is that right?
Genetics and cell biology.
Yeah. So how much, you're a scientist, you're in life sciences. Was there like a moment, where you're like, I'm going to step away from research and empower other people's research to potentially gain more traction? I mean, because that's what you're doing. And, it's like, I can remember that with like Project MedTech. It's like, we're not innovating any new ideas, which is weird as a chemist, but we're enabling people to run faster at other ideas to potentially have more success. And it is like, it's an interesting transition. So I'm curious for you, like, what inspired that? What made you run towards entrepreneurship and not just staying in academia? Like, there's so many big transitions in your career, just looking at it. I'd be curious on how you navigated that, what inspired you, and then, you just kept running with it.
Yeah, I wish I could say that it was a carefully cultivated, thoughtful process, but It
Yeah.
wasn't. I think it was
Right.
like many people, it was situational and taking opportunities and taking leaps of faith. And, I, even in my graduate work, I didn't love research. Like, I love
Mhm.
science. I'm passionate about science. I have been since I was in the fourth grade. I have been boring people with like really nerdy, detailed levels of discussion about any topic that I care about
Eh,
when it comes to science, literally since the fourth grade, when I did a whole project on levers and pulleys, like I still remember these things, but I
yeah.
didn't necessarily love the the act of doing research. It felt isolating to me. It didn't necessarily use the parts of my personality that I valued the most. And what I always would come back to is that the light at the end of the tunnel felt so far away, and I wanted something with a little bit more of an immediate impact. Life happens, situations happened, and I ended up moving from my postdoc into a lab manager role for Fairfax Cryobank, and I loved it. I found myself doing a bit more leadership, more strategic work. I was still in the lab processing samples. It was cryopreservation and fertility preservation. And so I was still technically doing a little bit of the lab work, but over time really was able to move more into like a director of operations, and then got my high complexity clinical lab director certification to be the lab director, worked with the Met board, and um, loved that. But what I found myself really loving the most about that job were the sort of mentoring opportunities and of the staff and like training, but also the community outreach. I was able to do a lot of really cool like queer family building out, using donor sperm or directed donors, and um, you know, health conferences. And I was starting to really realize that those were the things that were like, filling my cup, and that
Mhm.
I felt that. And so when the opportunity came up at CIC, I actually remember in one of my interviews, uh, the person I'm speaking with said to me, like, why would you consider this? Like, you sound so happy in your current job.
Yeah.
Because I really thought, I was like, I'm going to retire here. I love this place. And
Yeah.
it's impactful work, right? Like, I went from doing stuff with like yeast cells and the spindle kinases involved in cell division that could potentially one day down the road lead to a cancer therapy, to like today doing something that meant someone was having a baby in a year. And
Mhm.
so that impact was so different. And my answer to that question was, well, I think it expands my impact, because I'm going from reproduction to life science, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And at the
Mhm.
time, it was in Philadelphia, but has grown to the potential to contribute globally. And it just, I think it played to all of the things that I feel are my strengths, and allowed me to positively impact other people. I did, this is just a little like nuanced thing between my jobs, like between the job transitions. I read Brene Brown's Dare to Lead. And I love that book. And she does this values exercise, and it's like 3 pages of just values listed. And you have to pick 2 or 3 or something. And I'm like,
Okay.
narrow your values down. But as I did this exercise, what it came down to were equity and impact were my 2
Mhm.
highest value drivers. And I was like, that is what CIC is. How can I
Yeah.
not take this job? Uh,
Mhm.
so it's a real privilege, and it is. I've worked with incredible people. So it wasn't, like I was saying in the beginning, this wasn't some very cultivated, thought out path to get me here. It was really seeing and or making opportunities, and
Mhm.
taking them. And I think that there's something about that that kind of mirrors an entrepreneur's journey in taking a commercializable idea and wanting to do a business out of it. Like, you're looking for opportunities and sort of leaning into your strength. So I sort of
Mhm.
see a parallel, even though I didn't start my own business. Like, it's there are parallels there.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, and the entrepreneurial journey, someone's career, like you can script out a game plan in your head as much as you want, but this is not a board game that has no external um, Like it has external conditions, it has luck involved, and there are scenarios that as much as you want to plan for, you're not going to face. I wrote a LinkedIn post a while ago about comparing it to a game called Catan, Settlers of
I
Catan.
Catan.
Yeah, I love Catan too, right? And that was the whole point, was I was likening so much of it to, like, when you first start, you look at the game board and go, okay, taking roles aside, here's the best strategic positions. These are the most likely numbers. This is where I need to be. This is where I'm going to go. I want to get to this port. Like, there's so much of it. And then the game happens.
You get a
And-
handful of sheep.
Hey, that's it. And people roll more 4s and 10s than 6s and 9s, and whatever it is, and you have to be able to adjust like that on the fly, and that is entrepreneurship. So yeah, walk me through a little bit about, like, some of that core value proposition of CIC, because I think that the one that we just quickly talked about, I think before we hit record, was lab space, right? That is a limiting factor in a lot of communities, is that maybe there isn't a lot of lab space, wet lab space, for some of these companies that need to take space, or and then there's, like, that's a very apparent one, but then there's a bunch of additional things as well. Having, like you talked about, Venture Cafe, having the programming, having the education, bringing the network and the local ecosystem in, bringing in national experts, right? Kind of having all those collision points set up. There's a lot of this that probably goes missed, or maybe not recognized when people join these communities. So give us a peek behind the curtain of how intentional all this is, and how you looked at it as well.
Yeah, it was interesting because when I said that I was joining CIC, people were like, "What are you doing? Like, going from science into real estate?" And I was like, "That's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing is I'm moving from, like, the hard science into infrastructure that makes science work or business work." It was less about real estate. Yes, we provide space, and that is critically important for many businesses. But you can take space a lot of different places and get very different experiences. And so when I tend to use the phrase invisible infrastructure, and it's the stuff that I don't know that all founders think about when they're making that move. Like, if you're in an academic environment, you're often very well supported. Everything's there. There's a canteen you can go to for lunch. There's an office, for health and wellness. Like, there are all these things that are happening around you that you're a part of. But when you go out, and if you take an empty space in a building, like, where's your internet coming from? Are you making coffee? Like, what? All of these things that you have to think about for, what type of data plan do you have? All of these different questions come up that you're like, I just want to do my work. I just want to be at the bench. I just want to get this idea commercialized. I want to meet with it, prep my pitch deck. And so when I talk about the invisible infrastructure, that's what it is. It's coming in, it's literally plug and play. You have a desk, you have a beautiful, comfortable chair, an Aeron chair, the lighting's there, you can get the shelving that you need, a walk-in cabinet, like, all of this is already there. The photocopy, scan, all that fax, it's all part of it. You don't have to manage any of that. The internet is there for you. Stocked kitchens. Then there's the team that I talked about, and they're doing things like running community engagement events. There are opportunities for networking. There's programming that is, I always use the example that we did this program for bookkeeping. It was like bookkeeping 101, because you're building a business. We had advisors come in about, when do you need HR? And the answer was, when there's more than one person, you need HR. Like, and that doesn't mean you need to hire somebody. It means you can contract, fractional C-suite members, like these type of resources. We can help make those connections and provide that. And then, of course, for example, in Philadelphia, we are partnered with UCSC. And so we've had member companies that have participated in their capital readiness program that came out of their first founders program. So you're basically in the middle of this community, this ecosystem, and you're not by yourself. And especially with the life science and med tech companies that we've had, we have seen for some of them, this has been hugely beneficial. You don't necessarily have to come in and immediately start, what is our company culture? You're coming into a place that has a culture, that has a really collaborative, resourced foundation that you're then building on. And you can participate or not, but the resources are there. So you're not starting from scratch. And what it does is it allows founders to really stretch their capital. So instead of coming in and like getting an empty spec suite and having to buy your cold storage, get your liquid nitrogen and your CO2, get your EHS license, we hold that, take care of your hazardous waste, your chemical licensure. You don't have to do any of that. Like we take care of all of that. We have a lab safety training that's set up. These things are all foundational for the companies to build on. And obviously when you go from 1 to like 3 benches, you're still using those shared resources. When you get up to like, 15, 20 benches, plus you've got the external offices with all of your admin support, then you're really truly building your unique company culture and building your own programs. Still, you have the resources here. Having access to all of the shared amenities and like a microscopy suite, a molecular suite, a micro suite, all of those things, you are then not having to pay for that equipment. It is all inclusive in your space. So it's more than just the physicality of the 4 walls. It's actually all of the amenities and resources that come with it. And I think we have seen that it has worked to help people. We had one founder who thought he had capital budget for a 3-year period, but because he came in and was utilizing all of the shared resources, he stretched that to 5 years, which is huge when it comes to a founder's journey.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, when you talk about stretching capital, especially in life sciences, and it is a little bit different than other industries, but your big value inflection point is clinical evidence. And if you can get to those points with as little capital as possible, it is better for the founders, for the early stage investors. It's better for everybody involved. And so helping that is big. The piece that I'd like to know more about is like if I was a early stage entrepreneur, with a product like this, and I went into CIC, I would be very interested in the fact that your other locations are set up in some pretty cool markets as well, and that's really helpful, especially in life sciences where it's like, okay, let's just pick Philly, Berlin, and one of the locations in Japan. It's
Tokyo.
Like, hey, that's Tokyo. That's a pretty cool thing to be able to say, hey, I know I'm in Philly right now, but actually I'm going to do some clinical sites in Europe. So can I take advantage of some of that network in Berlin? And also I'm interested in Japan. Help me with that. I mean, there's a lot there, and there's a lot just from business connections. There's also a lot from business professionalism as well in different communities across the world. Like for those who don't know, like, there are a lot of written rules that when you go to Japan, or unwritten rules, that you have to kind of be aware of it. What's the culture there? Same in Germany. I'm sure people coming to the US, the culture is different. And so, yeah, talk to me about how beneficial that can be for founders.
Yeah, it's funny. The first year, like when I started, we were still like smack in the pandemic. So I was just joking with my colleagues, like for the first 6 months working here, I didn't know what anybody really looked like. We were still all masking. And so, I wasn't traveling, I wasn't seeing the other campuses. And so this global passport that we have was just sort of was words on a page for me. I didn't understand the real value of it. And then I started being able to go to other campuses and experience the different cultures. And that even culturally, like St. Louis is different than Philadelphia, is different than Kendall
Totally.
Square, right? Like
Yep.
we can have those regional differences here, but then to go to Berlin or to Tokyo, like you're saying, it is wildly different business culture, and just having the cultural competency to navigate those different business relationships and how you show up in the workplace is so important, especially if you're looking to scale globally. And so our clients do have that option. If you're a member at any of our campuses, you can literally go and use the same card to tap in Berlin, to tap in Tokyo and use the co-working space, we hope that you'll introduce yourself to the team so that they can like give you a tour and tell you which, like you can get a matcha latte from this machine on this floor, but and all these different things. And also tell the team that you're at. Like we have a founder here in Philadelphia who was actually going to Tokyo for a conference, and they asked like, "Can I use the space there?" We're like, "Absolutely, you can use the conference rooms, the co-working, anything." I was like, "Make sure you bring extra business cards," and they're like, "Why?" I was like, "Everybody you meet, you shake their hand, you hand them a business card, you bow, you look at the business card." I was like, there is a business culture to this that is about building a relationship and honoring the person's role. And they were so grateful that I had told them that. They're like, "I ordered extra cards, thank God, because I ran out on my third day." And I was like, "It's no joke. I had extra business cards." And like
Yeah.
it is practice there that it is culturally part of their business. And it's actually really lovely. There's a ceremony to it. It makes you feel really seen and respected. And so like talking to the team and getting those little tips is really a fun benefit, but the actual benefit of them physically going and being able to say to potential investors in Japan, "Let's have our meeting in CIC Tokyo," and the investors saying, "Oh, okay," like it meant something to to those investors.
Yep. 100%. Yeah. There is when we started Project MedTech, we didn't need lab space, but we did go to a place called Spaces, which just gives, I forget who owns Spaces, but regardless, they just give you an office space, but there's a bunch of amenities to it. We're able to get conference rooms. It's a little more professional. We're able to bring people in. There's coffee there. Like it was a nice setup for us until we were able to kind of go off, and now we're in our awkward teen phase, where like we have our own space, but we don't command enough space to have like a really cool space. So it's like, it's a weird awkwardness, but the point was like, it was really helpful at those beginning stages to be able to do that, but also to have places to sit in other big cities. That was a big thing for us, is like, hey, when we go to another place, we're either relying on someone telling me where to go, or we can have a place to say, hey, we could post up here for the day and shuffle people in and out, right? And that's nice for startup companies, especially when they're going to these cities. Like good example is I'm coming to Philly 2 weeks from now, which, if people are listening to this, I've already been to Philly and back, because this isn't going to be released until after. But, we have, I have meetings, I think, like 30-minute breaks. I have like 5 of them throughout the first day I'm there. But, those are one of those times where like, it is nice to have a place to kind of camp out and be at, and just, it makes it a little bit easier. And so what a benefit for your startups, going to communities they don't know and having a place to say, hey, come to me. Here's a place I have, right?
Well, and I think it's easy to underestimate the value of having a comfortable space with, and I tend to underestimate. I'm a coffee drinker. I have one coffee in the morning and I'm good. Like I'm not all day, but I have seen the impact of not having your coffee from some of the client members or the companies. It is, even having to go to another floor feels inconvenient. And here you get it on every floor, but then also we have a great elixir is in the lobby. Like you have options, right? And not to have to worry about, like, especially when you're back-to-back meetings, like not to have to worry about being super hungry, and like you can go to the kitchen and get some nuts or get a piece of fruit or some yogurt. Like it really does lower the stress, and it makes it an easier day for people. And look, when you're back to back or you're having important meetings, feeling physically comfortable in the space is really important.
Totally. I totally agree with you. All right. Talk to me a little bit about maybe some of the common pitfalls you see a lot of these early stage companies maybe fall victim to. Like, obviously you have a lot in a lot of your different facilities. Like, is there one area where you see some of them struggle the most or need the most support? Walk me through some of that.
Yeah, I think the ones that we've, It's really different depending on what they're doing. Um, but in Philly, CAR T was so big, is so big.
Mm,
The
hmm
cell and gene therapy is really what Philly is known for. We are the top cell and gene therapy ecosystem in the country. And so, really seeing people having too narrow of a focus, like, and not necessarily thinking bigger picture or thinking about, how does this translate into a marketable either device or treatment? It being about one single gene instead of a delivery system that could be used for multiple genes. Like basically having too narrow a focus. But then again, if you're too broad, there are pitfalls to it. So I think it really is dependent on the specific field that you're in. It's what I will say is that for really early stage, like literal spinouts for academia, it is underestimating the resources that you will need, underestimating the amount of funding that you will need. Like thinking like, oh, I hit this milestone of X dollars, I can quit now, not quit, but like I can sort of focus in on the work again and not necessarily be on this journey for more capital. Always go for more. If there's an
hmm
opportunity, like money does not go as far as you think it's going to go. It's also it's also about the people that you're surrounding yourself with, right? Like it's your co-founder, it's the people that you're hiring, it's building the business, really truly building a business. It's underestimating the time and energy it takes there, because a lot of us scientists like to be heads down at the bench, doing the work, crunching the data, get publishing all of those things, writing grants, all of those. But it's as important when you are commercializing something to think about it as the business and what that's going to take in terms of your investment of time and energy and money.
I love that. Um, okay, I got two more questions. The one generally I ask it in terms of like, hey, if you had one piece of advice for a startup company that was international coming to the U.S., what do they need about the U.S. healthcare system? But yeah, I'm just curious from your direct experience, like as you have some of those companies in Japan or in Germany or wherever they are who are like, hey, I'm a life science company. I want to come to the US. US is like the most sought after market from that perspective. Um, what are some of the things you prep them for? Like, is it related to business culture here? Is it related to how the US healthcare system differs as opposed to where they're coming from? What are some of those like background things that you're trying to get them ready for US market entry?
Yeah, that's a really great question. The business culture, I think less so coming into the
Right.
US. There's so much more flexibility and especially depending on your specific product line. Like I think we're less restrictive when it comes to business culture than a lot of other countries.
I
It is,
totally agree.
yeah, it is
Yeah.
much more about the complexities of our regulatory systems and health insurance. For example, someone's going to Berlin and, to move into Germany, I'm like, get ready for bureaucracy, get ready for
Yeah.
contracts, get ready for, processes and systems coming here. It's not easy to navigate the regulatory environment, whether
Yeah.
it's FDA or if you need to be CLIA certified or CAP, navigating those processes and ensuring that your protocols and your SOPM is compliant is incredibly challenging. And so what I often recommend and have done in the past is connect people with consultants that can
Mhm.
help advise on that. I think you're familiar with this. Um, but I think that's really incredibly important because it is
Yeah.
so hard to build from scratch. And
hmm
you don't have to. You don't have
hmm
to go from scratch, right? Because there are great
Yeah.
resources like you will. And,
Yeah.
and there are a lot of great resources. And similarly, navigating the healthcare system here is incredibly complex and
hmm
I, I think needlessly complex.
hmm
There talk about barriers to entry. It's really tough. And I think in some instances, I understand the intention. And I used to say this all the time at my last job too. Like I get it. FDA's intention is to keep us safe, but it's overly complex.
hmm
It can be really challenging to navigate. And so yeah, connecting people with resources is I think one of the best things that we can do. We have our Catalyst team runs varied soft landing programs, and we have a Japan desk that runs programs from Tokyo to the US. And we collaborate for these programs that are like a week or 10 days, and they bring companies over and we have them meet with ecosystem partners from the chamber to, great researchers that Chop or Penn or Jeff,
Mhm.
to then also a couple of lawyers that do IP and patent law. It's sort of it's kind of a patchwork quilt. Like it's a lot of different pieces that are all important to sew together into one to be successful. And so it's the resourcing.
Mhm. Yeah, no, those are all really good points. And, one of someone said it on the podcast at one point in time or said it at one of our events, but, when companies are looking to come here, we always tell them that the United States of America is the name is misleading. We're anything but a United States of America. It's 50 very independent states, and that does you know that does affect, though, like, even insurance aside, just talking about where to potentially set your company up.
Yes.
States all the way down to cities have drastically different incentive programs, and they change very frequently. I mean, if you looked at a city 5 years ago that ranked really high, it could rank really low now because maybe the incentive structure ran out. It's
Yep.
like these things move around very fast, and you have to have someone who can help you navigate all these different places.
Yeah. That's a
Okay.
really good point. I really appreciate that you brought up the incentives because that is, like you said, drastically different city to city, state to state, but also changes so much over time. We are part here in Philly, we are part of the Keystone Opportunity Zone
Mhm.
and the KIZ program. And so that is a benefit here that you do have that tax incentive. But I think about even what I used to do when I was at the reproductive clinic. And if we were doing something with New York, the New York regs were often more complicated and difficult to navigate than even like the FDA's regulations.
Mhm.
So also considering like if you're looking to relocate into one of the US states, look carefully at what the local
Oh,
regulatory and health and Department of Health regs are.
yeah, no question. I mean, and you talked about fractional HR. Even in terms of human resources, and where you're going to hire team
Yeah.
members, yeah, talk to human resources people, because there are states that are going to be overwhelmingly difficult and other states that are going to be much easier. And as an early stage company, that seriously might sway where you set up
Hey,
shop
there.
for your company. 100%. Awesome. Okay, so you already gave us one book that you would recommend. Obviously, when I'm in my home office, people can see that I enjoy reading. And yeah, do you have another book recommendation that you would recommend? And I should preface this with, it can be fiction or nonfiction. We've had a couple
Oh,
people. We've had a couple people actually do fiction recently. I don't know if it's been released yet, but one of my recent guests gave me, he was like, "Oh, I only read fiction." And he gave me a series, and it was like, there were like 35 books in the series. And I was like, "Hey, I appreciate that. I got a 5 and a 2-year-old.." Like, there's no
yeah.
chance. So
That's
it can
like
be fiction
16
or
years from now.
nonfiction. Yeah, yeah. But fiction or nonfiction, and you can give more than one if you want.
All right, I'm gonna do one of each then.
Okay, sweet.
I will recommend The Culture Map by Erin Meyer.
Okay.
It's one that my team and I are going to be reading and doing a session on together in the coming months. It is an incredible book that it's about breaking boundaries in business cultures globally. And so it's
Mhm.
about understanding, like, if, I have colleagues that are Dutch, and
Mhm.
the Dutch are incredibly direct. They're very decisive. It's very, the decision making is very top down. And then I have my colleagues in Japan, where it's indirect communication and so collaborative decision making,
Mhm.
and the communication style is very different. So it's an incredible resource for understanding the business culture globally, um, And when I get into it even deeper, I think I'm going to like it even more. I've done a couple of chapters and have started using some of the infographics to refer back to. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And it has made me wonder if I'm Dutch actually, or maybe German, because I love operations and process.
Yeah.
But then the fiction book that I will recommend is the book that I recommend to everybody I know, which is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho.
Okay.
And the idea there, it's a parable and it's a short read. It is a beautiful book. It's really about fate and the universe conspiring to get you where you're supposed to be, following the omens, listening to your gut, trusting your instincts. And it's a book that I will reread once a year or once every other year. And I get something different out of it each time. And actually, I was reading it the week going into when I got the offer for this job.
Wow.
And it really spoke to me in a different way. And I was like, oh, this is about taking that leap of faith. And the idea that the universe will continue to put opportunities in front of you until you get where you're supposed to be. And I love that idea of like, the omens and trusting your gut and looking for signs, and that there is something that is beyond us that is conspiring to help us be successful and joyful in life.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome.
yeah.
I love it. Perfect. Yeah. My list of books keeps getting longer and longer up there. A lot of them
Do you
are
have
like,
one that you recommend to everyone?
if they're an entrepreneur, Start With Why by Simon Sinek. That's a classic. And it's a really good one. And then, anything by Danny Kahneman and Amos Tversky. Those are excellent books around decision making, because I think that most of what you do as an entrepreneur at some point is, and the reason I like both of those books is like, one book and one series of books, I guess, is that, you have to have the why, because this is a long race. And if you don't have a strong why of what you're anchoring to, you'll never make it. From the decision-making process, a lot of what you end up doing is making really difficult decisions. And I think the more you know about how people make decisions and how you make decisions, and the stronger it makes you as an entrepreneur. So both of those I would recommend, like right off the rip, for people. Yeah.
The Start With Why is not at all surprising, knowing that you're a chemist and a scientist. Like, we always want to know the why and start with the why.
100%. Yeah. Earlier today, I was in the reverse seat, which is really difficult for me, where I was on someone else's podcast and we were talking about that Start With Why. And I think that's why, like, when you anchor to that as a scientist, it is a nice reminder sometimes to just revert back to that, because, you're going to go through those days where you're like, whew, this is hard, but as long as you have that why anchored, you'll be all right. Yeah.
100% agree.
Yeah. Awesome. Michelle, hang on for 1 minute. We'll chat offline, but we'll include links to your LinkedIn, CIC's website, and the book recommendations. So up or down an inch, people can click on that. But thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure.
Hi, I'm Freddie Coffey, Director of Marketing at Jumpstart. The Project MedTech podcast is proudly sponsored by Jumpstart Inc. Jumpstart's Trailblazer Accelerator helps Ohio's most innovative early-stage health tech startups fast-track their growth with tailored advising from serial entrepreneurs, non-dilutive funding to fuel their journey, and unrivaled access to a network of experts, resources, and investment opportunities. Whether it's improving patient outcomes, advancing digital health, or reimagining care delivery, Jumpstart provides the high-impact services and critical resources to bring big ideas to life. Learn more at jumpstartinc.org/startups.
Thank you for listening. At our core, we at Project MedTech are networkers, educators, and consultants. We meet you where you are to bring value and to create impact. We care deeply about helping medtech companies succeed right from the start, through to exit, by providing consulting and fractional services, hosting impactful industry events, and of course, sharing incredible guest insights like the ones you heard today through our podcast. Please reach out at any time if we can be of assistance. Check out our website at www.projectmedtech.com or email us at info@projectmedtech.com.